champ now.
Yes, I didn't say. What are you looking so sad about, champ?
I'm surprised. I mean, I'm really insulted. That's not right, what you just said.
What do you mean, what I just said?
I mean, I'm getting a drink of water. I'm late getting home, but you talk. I said something about the greatest heavyweight champ, man. I'm a hometown man, and you talking about Joe Louis, man. Joe Louis wouldn't be nothing for me. Joe, I tell you, Joe, do you think you would have stood a chance with me?
Well, crazy. One time during my career, I was on a Formula 1 tour.
I would have been a bum compared to you.
What's happening, my people? It's Cat Sports again, back for another afternoon with the family. That's right, you know what time it is. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Box Story, bringing you all that boxing history. Boxing is the greatest sport of them all. That's why we love it. Can't get enough of it. Salute to Miss Cass. Without her, none of this would be possible. Salute to everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cass Sports, the Box Story. Today, Carnera, Baer, Sharkey, Braddok, and Schmeling, the 5 champions that preceded the Brown Bomber, as a family today. There were 6 world champions throughout the 1930s, 5 in the first 6 years, and then Joe Louis made it 6 in 1937. And all 5 of the champions that preceded him, he beat them on the way to the crown. And we're going to highlight those 5 champions today. Again, PRIMO, Carnera, Max Baer, Jack Sharkey, James J. Braddok, and Max Schmeling. Now, he didn't beat Max Schmeling until after he won the title, but he fought Max Schmeling before he won it and lost. So we're going to look at the 5 champions that preceded the Brown Bomber today. And then we're going to look at a couple of fights he was involved in against them. All that today on Cast Sports the Box Story, bringing you all of that boxing history. Let's get to our fight of the day to get things started. Okay, today's fight of the day is Joe Louis versus James J. Braddok, June 22nd, 1937. The Brown Bomber's historic reign begins. The Brown Bomber historic reign begins. Okay, let's get into it. Today's fight of the day. Okay. The James Braddok versus Joe Louis fight was a heavyweight championship fight between contested at Comiskey Park in Chicago, Illinois, in which undefeated challenger Joe Louis defeated defending champion James J. Braddok by technical knockout in the 8th round of a scheduled 15-round fight. Both fighters weighed in at 197 pounds, with Louis, age 23, landing a decisive right hand to Braddock's jaw that dropped the 32-year-old champion for a count of 10 after he had risen from an earlier knockdown. The victory marked Lewis's first world heavyweight title win, initiating a record-breaking reign that lasted until 1949 and included 25 consecutive successful title defenses. That's when it all began. This fight right here. The Brown Bomber. Mike Grimm in the building. What's up, Mike Grimm? Looking at the 5 champions that preceded Joe Louis today, and the fight of the day is when he won his first title. James J. Braddok, June 22nd, 1927. Okay, salute Mike Grimm. Let's continue. James J. Braddok, dubbed the Cinderella Man for his improbable comeback from hand injuries, unemployment, and labor work during the Great Depression to claim the heavyweight title of the world by outpunching Max Baer in 1935. Braddok entered this fight as a sentimental favorite, despite being a heavy underdog against the younger, harder-punching Joe Louis. Louis, known as the Brown Bomber, had rebounded from his sole professional loss to Max Schmeling in 1936 with knockout victories over top contenders, showcasing superior speed, power, and combination punching that overwhelmed Braddok after a competitive early exchange. The event drew an estimated crowd of over 80,000 spectators and underscored Lewis's emergence as a dominant force in boxing, symbolizing a generational shift in the heavyweight division. This matchup highlighted Contrasting career trajectories. Braddock's resilience against adversity versus Lewis's meteoric rise from amateur stardom to professional phenom, with the latter's technical mastery proving decisive in ending Braddock's brief but inspiring championship tenure. No major controversies marred the fight, though Braddok later reflected that the knockout punch exacerbated a prior jaw fracture, contributing to his retirement from the ring. The outcome solidified Lewis's legacy as one of boxing's greatest heavyweights, while affirming Braddock's status as a Depression-era folk hero whose underdog story resonated enduringly. The selection of Comiskey Park, home of the Chicago White Sox, provided a neutral venue with substantial capacity for the high-profile event, accommodating the anticipated large turnout. A paid attendance of over 45,000 spectators generated a gate receipt of nearly $750,000, marking one of the largest boxing crowds of the era, despite some reports estimating total presence up to 60,000, including gate crashers. Pre-fight promotion emphasized the contrasting narratives of the fighters. Braddok, the improbable champion, dubbed the Cinderella Man for his comeback from dock worker poverty, defending against Lewis, the undefeated Brown Bomber, with a record of 32 wins, all by knockout or stoppage. Betting odds heavily favored Lewis, listed at approximately 5-1 odds against Braddok, reflecting public perception of Lewis's superior power and speed despite Braddock's title status. Promoter Mike Jacobs, who managed Lewis, orchestrated extensive publicity, including nationwide tours and media campaigns that heightened anticipation. The matchup carried racial undertones amid 1930s America, where Lewis's challenge represented an opportunity for the first black heavyweight champion since Jack Johnson's controversial reign ended 22 years earlier in 1915, stirring both support from black American communities and skepticism from segments viewing Braddok as a symbolic white hope. While not overly framed as a racial showdown by promoters to avoid backlash similar to Johnson's era, the event symbolized broader social tensions, with Lewis's victory anticipated to boost morale in black communities nationwide. Public interest surged, drawing dignitaries, including governors and congressmen, underscoring the fight's status as a cultural spectacle beyond mere athletics. Braddok opened aggressively, flooring Lewis with a right uppercut to the chin. Approximately 1 minute into the fight, Lewis rose at the count of 4 and quickly regained composure, dominating the remainder of the round with sharper combinations while Braddok pressed forward cautiously. Lewis asserted control through superior hand speed and ring generalship, landing heavier punches to Braddok's body and head, gradually eroding the champion's output. Braddok connected sporadically with counters, but absorbed mounting punishment, showing signs of fatigue as Lewis's volume increased without sustaining damage from the early knockdown. In round 7, Braddok's face swelled significantly from cuts and impact, prompting his manager, Joe Gold, to consider halting the fight between rounds due to the visible distress his fighter was in. Lewis maintained pressure, targeting the weakening defenses with precise left hooks and rights, though Braddok endured to complete the round on his feet. The Boxing Menu podcast in the building. Salute the Boxing Menu podcast. Fight of the day, Joe Lewis versus James J. Braddok. Anybody listening, please subscribe to the Boxing Menu podcast. Another great podcast in these YouTube streets. Salute. Boxing Menu podcast. Okay, let's continue. Finish up the fight of the day. At 1 minute, 10 seconds of round 8, Lewis feinted a left hook to the body before delivering a crushing right hand to Braddok's chin, following an earlier body shot that sapped resistance. Braddok collapsed lifelessly, unable to rise before referee Tommy Thomas's count of 10, ending the fight and crowning Joe Lewis as the heavyweight champion of the world. There you have it. The fight of the day is your winner, the Brown Bomber, Joe Lewis. Okay, so now today, we got, like I was saying at the top of the show, there were the first 6 years of the decade of the 1930s, there were 5 champions. Large turnover for heavyweight champions in the 30s. First 6 years, 5 different champions, and in 1937, Joe Lewis made it 6th. And all 5 champions that preceded him, he beat all of them on the way to the title. And we're going to look at all 5 of those champions that preceded Joe Lewis today. Now, Max Schmeling, he beat him after he won the title, but he fought him before he won it and lost to him. But he did eventually beat all 5 champions that preceded him. And that's what today's show is. We're going to look at all 5 of these guys that preceded the great Brown Bomber, Joe Lewis, on his way to the crown. Okay? How's everybody? It's Thursday afternoon, deep into this week of boxing history now. Tomorrow, profile day, is going to be the life and career of Laila Ali. The life and career of Laila Ali. And man, she had a lot of pressure on her shoulders when she started fighting, being the daughter of Muhammad Ali, the greatest, and she did a very good job of making her own name, okay? Started out being known as the daughter of the greatest, but ended up being known as a 24-0, 21 by way of knockout, 87% knockout ratio. Tomorrow, the life and career of Laila Ali. But now, Carnera, Baer, Sharkey, Braddok, and Schmeling, the 5 champions that preceded the Brown Bomber. Mike Mazik, salute Mike, in the building. We're just talking about boxing in the 1930s today. Basically, that's what we're doing. 5 champions that preceded the great Brown Bomber. Salute Mike Mazik. Okay, let's go. Let's get into today's show now. Hope everybody enjoyed. Appreciate you stopping by. Joe Louis, who began his record-setting reign as world heavyweight champion in June of 1937, was preceded by a rapid succession of champions in the 1930s. The 5 champions that preceded Joe Louis were James J. Braddok, Max Baer, PRIMO Carnera, Jack Sharkey, and Max Schmeling. Louis famously knocked out 4 of these men during his rise to the title, with Max Schmeling being his most famous opponent, whom he knocked out in their rematch in June of 1938. Let's talk about PRIMO Carnera first. Big PRIMO, they called him the Amling Amp. Starting out with PRIMO. Here's PRIMO. He was a big man too. Okay. Everybody hit the like and subscribe, please. On the phone today. The laptop equipment failure today, but we're going to get it done. Starting out with the Amling Ant, PRIMO Carnera. Yeah, PRIMO was a giant of a man, Italian fighter. Get ready to talk about it. One moment. The like and subscribe, super chat, cash app, all that. Okay, PRIMO Carnera, the Amling Ant. Let's go. Technique in the building. Salute Technique. How are you? Talking about those, all 5 of the champions that preceded Joe Louis. Large turnover in the 1940s in the as far as heavyweight champions. 5 in the first 6 years, and then Joe Louis made 6 by 1937. 6 different champions in the first 7 years of that decade. Crush, the legend in the building. What's up, Crush? The morning man. Most mornings, 6 p.m. The baddest morning show in the land. Of course, I'm biased, but biased or not, Crush the Legend is still the baddest morning show in the land. Salute, Crush. How are you today? Day going all good for you? Appreciate you stopping by. Yeah, 6-6 technique. Big PRIMO. Yeah, we get ready to talk about him right now. The Amling Alp, PRIMO Carnera. In Sequoia, Italy, on October 26, 1906, the man known as the Amling Alp, PRIMO Carnera, remains one of the best known and most fascinating of all heavyweight kings, and not always due to reasons that could be called flattery. With many of his fights now pretty much thought of as having been setups due to the huge influence the American mob had over the naive and unsuspecting Carnera, the huge Italian's place in history is that of a curiosity, more so than a great and legendary champion, but never proven that he was a mob fighter. Okay, gotta add that. Suspected, but never proven. This is not to suggest that PRIMO was out without courage though, for he very definitely had guts. His merits and accomplishments as a boxer, however, are fully deserving of the questionable way in which they are looked upon by historians. Quite simply, no one can be sure which of PRIMO's fights were on the level and which were not. Due to his freakish height and overall size, PRIMO was instantly seen to be a potential money spinner by the less than scrupulous characters that were orbiting around the boxing world in the United States at the time of his 1930 arrival, namely the mob. Whether he could fight or not, they knew PRIMO would make them vast amounts of cash. With his granite size and perceived strength, Carnera was a dead cert to fill the arenas. He was snapped up on this premise almost as soon as he stepped off the boat. PRIMO never had a chance. With the man who had first discovered him in Paris, Leon C., in the official role of manager, the giant was entirely in the hands of selfish and uncaring individuals. With no concern whatsoever for his health, Carnera was eventually thrown into brutal beating after brutal beating. After all, his value had been used up, that is. Firstly, though, they wanted the army out to win as many fights as possible and then fight for the world title. Sure enough, the big crowds came to see the gigantic boxer from overseas. Like Technique said, PRIMO stood 6'6" and 1/4 inches tall. And the crowds did come to see him. And sure enough, the team behind him saw to it that he came through his first 20-odd fights in the United States without a loss. Now, some of the fights were outright farces, while others looked to be legitimate. For example, PRIMO's fight with Alzir Rouse was subject to an investigation afterwards. The action had looked so suspicious, they had an investigation after the fight. And Rouse's license was revoked after the fight, and he was also fined. PRIMO's opponent. He threw the fight so bad, his license was revoked and he was fined. Okay? Another fight that looked decidedly bogus was Carnera's match with Leon Chevalier. Now, the crowd was extremely unhappy when the action was halted in round 6, with Chevalier seemingly in no worse shape than was Carnera, whose purse was withheld afterwards. There were more fights that had a definite sinister feel to them, including PRIMO's tussle with George Godfrey, where a near riot broke out after a controversial stoppage in the 5th round. Yeah, almost had a riot after that stoppage. Yeah, PRIMO was in some very controversial fights, but again, never proven to be mob controlled. But it sure looked like it. There were two, however, performances by Carnera that looked to have been legit. His 4th round knockout over Bearcat Wright, for instance, impressed many. So were all Carnera's early fights fixed? Probably not. But more than a fair share of them certainly were. What is also certain is the fact that his handlers were wasting no time in reaping the rewards their fighter could earn them. 26 times in the year 1930 alone, PRIMO fought. With this breakneck pace, the money was rolling in. But not that PRIMO saw much of it. Yep, the money was rolling in. But that don't mean PRIMO was seeing a lot of it. There were early setbacks in the form of points defeats to guys like Jim Maloney and Jack Sharkey. And he met Sharkey again soon after the 15-round points lost to him. But mostly, aside from the negative press that followed some of his more obviously less than genuine encounters, the plan was working out fine for his handlers. PRIMO was soon a household name in America. And it wasn't too long, however, before tragedy struck. After a short time spent back fighting in countries in Europe, including his native Italy, PRIMO was deemed ready to make his move on the world title. Upon getting yet more early knockout wins, some visually impressive, others not, Primo was matched with a fighter named Ernie Shaft. This is where the tragedy came into the Carnera story. Ernie shockingly passed away 4 days after his fight with Primo, more than likely due to injuries he had sustained in a previous contest. Nonetheless, Primo was devastated and for a time wanted to hang up his gloves. But he fought on, probably given little or no choice by his handlers. And he challenged for the heavyweight title. With now genuine respect accorded his punching power due to the Shaft incident, Primo signed the box current champion Jack Sharkey, the same man who had handily outpointed him almost 2 years earlier. But this time it was different. Sharkey had been good friends with Shaft, the one that had died after the fight with Primo. Even working his corner at times, had been greatly upset at his friend's tragic death. His second fight with the man who Ernie had fought his last against was a strange affair as a result. Controlling the action for the first 5 rounds, Sharkey was suddenly taken out in the 6th with a huge right uppercut from Primo. Right uppercut, left hand combination to the head. Sharkey was controlling all the first 5 rounds, and all of a sudden Primo took him out. Sharkey crashed face first to the canvas, and Primo was the new world champion. In the years that followed, given a definite shady side to his career up until then, some questions the validity of Primo's win over Sharkey. The way Sharkey had felt caused doubts in certain people's minds as to whether or not he had been genuinely knocked out. For his part, Sharkey later said to have been affected by his friend's death going into the fight, and even went so far as to claim that he had seen a vision of the deceased Shaft just before the knockout. So, was the Carnera-Sharkey fight fixed? Of course, we will never know for sure, but the events that unfolded the night the two fought for the title in 1933 do not sit right with a good many boxing people. That much is sure. Whatever, Primo was now the champion. He was back in the ring defending the title in pretty quick time. A 15-round points win over the Spaniard, Paulino Escudon in Rome, was his first successful defense. While his points win over the 84-pound lighter man in Tommy Loughlin in a fight staged at Madison Square Garden the following year was his last successful title defense. Then Primo ran into Max Baer, fighting one of the hardest hitters the heavyweight division has ever seen. Primo was ruthlessly and brutally beaten up. 11 times he was sent crashing to the canvas in 11 rounds. And while Primo's courage was evident to all in the fight, because he kept getting up, so too were his many shortcomings in the art of pugilism. He was utterly bewildered, and Max never let him off the hook, intent instead on inflicting hurt on the clumsy Italian. The fight was a huge hit with the audience, many of whom were laughing out loud at the bizarre action. Never before had a defending heavyweight champion been made to look so foolish. Primo would never contend for the title again. Let me drop that a little bit. I can't gauge this music properly when I'm on the phone. I think that's better. Oh, now I done messed up. Bear with me for a second, please. Okay. Okay, we're back. Back with Primo, the Owling Alp. Yeah, after the Max Baer beat him down, 11 knockdowns in 11 rounds before it stopped him, Primo never fought for the title again after that. Okay? His fighting days, however, were not over yet. Used only as fodder by handlers that treat him in a way that went beyond mere cruelty. Primo was thrown in with the new star of the division, the murderous punching brown bomber Joe Louis. In June of 1935, Primo was subjected to a most hideous beating over 6 painful rounds. Again and again, the brown bomber's lethal fist smacked into his defenseless head and jaw. 3 times he hit the mat before the referee put a stop to the carnage in the 6th round. Primo was very lucky not to have been seriously hurt in this fight. But he took a beating for 6 rounds. Okay. He took a beating for 6 rounds. After he lost his title and they couldn't get no more money out of him. They tried to get a piece of the Joe Louis money, and his handlers threw Primo in there with Joe Louis. Young Joe Louis, right? And it was bad. It was very bad for Primo. The referee saved him. Yeah. Saved him from his handlers. Okay. Yeah, Primo was lucky not to have been seriously and permanently injured in this fight against Joe Louis. Still, he was to fight on even after that. After 4 more meaningless wins, Primo was battered to defeat on 2 occasions by the big punching Leroy Haynes, losing in 3 rounds the first time and in 9 gruesome rounds the second. Finally, after these 2 humiliating and hurtful experiences, Primo escaped to his native land by way of France and Hungary for good, went back to Italy. He was out from the clutches of his evil handlers at last. Finally got away from him. Arnie Boxing in the building. What's up, Arnie? How are you today, my friend? Arnie Boxing, 9 o'clock. Fire Boxing Podcast. Salute, Arnie. Talking about the 5 men that preceded Joe Louis as champion in the 30s. You know, we had 6 champions in 7 years. Large turnover for heavyweight champions in the 30s. Joe Louis made the 6 in 1937. And he beat the 5 that had preceded him as champion. And my pen stopped working. Okay, yeah, let's continue. But salute, Irony. I wrote Irony and stopped working on boxing. Okay, but I had enough. Let's finish this up. Primo. Yeah, finally he got away from his handlers. He went back home to Italy, where he was from. Now, after a handful of fights in his home country in Italy, mostly losses, Primo found some happiness in the sport of wrestling, right? Went into wrestling. This way, he probably should have been in the first place. A sport where, with his huge size and strength, he was quite successful. He then retired to run an off license in the town of his birth, right? To Qual, Italy. Before his death in 1967, there was yet more heartache for the huge boxer. He got into movies. In his final film, Humphrey Bogart starred in a boxing movie that was clearly based on Primo and the time he spent fighting in America. Now, though the characters' names were different, the similarities were so apparent, a blind man could see them. With his permission not even asked for, let alone granted, Primo sued the filmmakers unsuccessfully. It really is somewhat ironic that a film that evokes such sympathy for a lead character that is so obviously based on Primo also both insulted and failed to benefit the used and abused man who inspired this very storyline. Yep, Primo sued and lost. Primo Carnera, 1906 to 1967. Heavyweight champion of the world, 1933 to 1934. His final record was 88 wins, 15 losses, no draws, 71 knockouts. Yep. For a knockout ratio of 80% on the dot. It's not bad. 80 wins and 80% knockout ratio is not bad at all. Okay, we're looking at the 5 champions that preceded Joe Louis in the 30s. Next is the hard-punching Max Baer. Yeah, Max Baer was a killer. I think a couple of people died after fighting him. There's Mad Max. Had a brother, Buddy Baer. Plus, Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies is his son, Max Baer Jr. Yup. And Ellie Mae is his daughter. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Jethro is the son for real, though. Yeah, let's get into Max Baer. Now. Yeah, we're gonna look at, and then we're gonna look at a couple of fights with Joe and a couple of these guys that preceded him as champion. He beat all of them. Max Schmeling, he beat Max Schmeling after he won the title, but he fought Max Schmeling before he won the title, and Max Schmeling beat him. Beat Joe Louis. Max Schmeling was one of the first fighters to watch film on fighters before fights, right? Remember, he saw Joe Louis when he jabbed, when he's bringing that left hand back home after the jab, he curled it low. And Max bided his time and hurt Joe Louis bad in the 4th. Joe Louis never recovered from that. And Max eventually stopped him around the 11th or 12th. We're going to talk about it in moments, but Max Baer is next. Here's Max, Jethro's father. Not Ellie Mae. Okay, here we go. How good of a boxer was Max Baer anyway? Glad y'all asked. Let's talk about it. Now, Max Baer, though called the Clown Prince of Boxing, was a great fighter. One of the top 100 of all time. Out of 31,877 boxers in the database, Max Baer is one of the top 100 of all time. Now, Baer was also undisputed world heavyweight champion, one of only 23 in all of boxing history to hold that title. Run a little bit more. But only fanboys who know nothing about Max Baer and watch YouTube instead of actually going to fights claim Max Baer was not a great fighter. Who was Max Baer? Now, most people only know what this movie Cinderella Man claimed about Mac, the false, fake movie made by Ron Howard. Okay? Ron just made what he wanted to make. He didn't do his homework. Terrible movie. The real Max Baer was completely different than the movie. In truth, the real Max Baer Sr. was absolutely nothing like the caricature that Ron Howard put on the screen, feeling that he had to create a movie villain to show the audience what a heroic figure James J. Braddok was, who the movie was really about, the Cinderella Man, right? We're going to get to James too, right? So Ron Howard, in order to make James J. Braddok more heroic, falsified it and made Max Baer more villainous, okay? Now, Max Baer in real life was a fun-loving and charismatic man. He was considered by many, including Nat Fleischer, the founder of Ring Magazine, to be the heavyweight most responsible for keeping the fans interested in the heavyweight division during the onset of the Great Depression. Max Baer. And Nat Fleischer would know. He founded the Bible of Boxing in Ring Magazine. Max Baer was the first fighter to realize the public perception of him was part of his appeal and part of how he could make money, that it affected the box office. He was unquestionably the first really popular heavyweight since Jack Dempsey, who came a decade before him. Baer's personality made him perhaps the most popular heavyweight boxer in his era, between Jack Dempsey and Joe Louis. Okay? Baer was the man in between those two. And besides all that, he was a great fighter. BoxRec ranked him 69th of all time. And he certainly had a record worthy of that ranking. He fought the following top 9 100 heavyweights of all time. All of these fighters in the top 100. Joe Louis, Tommy Loughran, Max Schmeling, Roscoe Toles, PRIMO Carnera, Jack Sharkey, Lou Nova, Ernie Shaft, Tony Goletto, Tommy Farr, Two-Ton Tony. 10. Max beat 8 of those 10 at least once. And that's a higher percentage of wins against top competition than Vladimir Klitschko had. And Max faced better competition than George Foreman or Mike Tyson. In June of 1935, Baer lost his heavyweight title to one of history's biggest upsets, to James J. Braddok. The Baer had taken Braddok lightly, and he barely trained for the fight. He was soundly outboxed by the underestimated Braddok, who was a very good light heavyweight, whose career had been derailed by injuries. Now healthy, he beat Max Baer for the title because, again, Max took him lightly and barely trained. 3 months later, Baer lost a desperate attempt to win the title back by fighting #1 contender Joe Louis. If Baer won that fight against Louis, he would get a title shot. If he lost, his title hopes were likely gone forever. Because every hope he had of reviving his title hopes depended on his facing and beating Joe Louis. Baer ignored worsening problems with his hands. Fearing needed operations would cancel the fight, and he would never get another shot at the title. In a further desperate effort to find a miracle, Baer convinced Jack Dempsey to work his corner, hoping some of his magic would rub off on him. Of course it did not. Jack Dempsey can't get in there and fight for you. And Jack Dempsey probably wouldn't have beat Joe Louis at that time neither. You know, Joe Louis was the Brown Bomber then. Now, Baer desperately wanted his title back. but he had to go through Joe Louis to get it. It was a title eliminator, right? The winner would get the title shot with James J. Braddok. Baer was a slugger, and a slugger in the ring against Joe Louis with both hands badly injured. His right hand was broken. His left wrist was injured by a bone chip, and he could not use either hand effectively. Yeah. This is part of that fight right here. It was just bad. This is part of Baer and Joe Louis right here. Check this out. It was bad. Now jump in there and stop it, referee. The man ain't even fighting back. The referee walking over there and walking away. That shit, nowadays that would be stopped. When the last time Baer really threw a punch? He just holding his hand out, holding him off. And right then the round ended. The referee still didn't stop it. He jumped in when the round ended. But I don't think Baer came back out after that round. He shouldn't have, because that was bad. But let's continue. But he couldn't use either hand effectively against prime Joe Louis. So let's continue. Yeah, nowadays that would have been stopped. But back then you really basically had to knock somebody out for 10 seconds. Yeah, he entered, right hand was broken, bone chips in his left wrist. Couldn't use either one effectively. His manager, Ansel Hoffman, pleaded with him to postpone the fight and get a specialist to examine his injuries. Baer was examined by Dr. William Healy, an orthopedic surgeon at Johns Hopkins University Hospital in Maryland. Dr. Healy told Baer that his left wrist will heal over time, but his right hand should be operated on before he fought again. But Baer decided to go ahead and fight Joe Louis instead of having the operation. And you just saw what the results of it was. Just weeks before he was to meet Louis, he told his wife, "I hope to God my hand heals before the fight." But the doctor had already told him it wasn't going to. He had to have the operation. Dr. Max Stern gave Baer several shots of Novocaine in his right hand in his dressing room before the fight. But the fight was delayed for 45 minutes due to rain. And the Novocaine started to wear off by the time Baer entered the ring. Baer had both hands disabled, and he never had a chance. Like I said, they were both medically such a mess, he couldn't use either one effectively. They were still in bad shape from the Braddok fight. And he went in there against Joe Louis and fought like that. So he had never had a chance in that fight against the Brown Bomber. And that was the title eliminator, right? And that was the end of his title hopes after that. But Max Baer was a great fighter though. He was heavyweight champion of the world at one point too in his career. So let's talk about the fight he had with Frankie. Then we're gonna move to the next one. The guy, one of the guys that died in the ring, Frankie Campbell. Now the movie Cinderella Man went out of the way to claim that two of Baer's earlier opponents, Frankie Campbell and Ernie Shaft, died from head injuries after losing to the rugged 6'2", 210-pound Baer. This also is at least partially wrong. Now, Ernie Shaft also fought PRIMO Carnera before he died, but Baer got the blame for it. Remember we talked about that in PRIMO? Baer's son, Max Jr., famous for portraying Jethro on the Beverly Hillbillies, sitcom of the 60s, has desperately tried to set the record straight about his father after they wrote that bogus movie about it. And the movie doesn't say who Frankie Campbell really was, the guy who died against him. Frankie Campbell was born Francisco Camilli in April or May of 1904 in the town of Hibbing, Minnesota, to Italian immigrants. Like most fighters, Frankie rose from poverty, using boxing as a doorway to a better life. Now, the collapse of Campbell in the ring in his fight with Max Baer in 1930 is well chronicled. Rushed to the hospital, the doctors told his family there was a brain bleed, and they feared the worst. A distraught Max Baer was there the entire night. Details of what followed the fight are well documented in Max Baer and the Star David by J. Neugebauer. None of this is, but Ron Howard didn't put none of this in the movie. He wanted Max Baer to look like a villain to make James J. Braddok look more of a hero. So the next morning after the fight, Frankie experienced hemorrhages, of the eyes and leakages of blood down the spinal column as death approached. Now, while he was hovering in the hospital room, where her husband's life was ebbing, despite the administration of oxygen as a last resort, Max Baer, tears as big as golf balls falling down his face, visited the stricken fighter's bedside, where he offered Elsie Campbell, Max's wife, the hand that had put her husband there. Frankie's wife took Max's hand, and the two stood speechless for a moment by Frankie's bedside. His wife told Max, "It was unfortunate." And she said, "That might be you, mightn't it?" When reporters later asked of her feelings towards Baer, she replied, "I have no room for bitterness in my heart today, only sorrow." And she told Max that could be him, sitting, laying in that bed like that, right? At mid-morning, last rites of the Catholic Church were administered to Frankie by Fathers Keeney and Meyer of St. Paul's Church. With a lit candle laced between his crossed fingers, his family and his managers beside him, Frankie Campbell was pronounced dead at 11:43, 13 hours after the fight. Upon the surgeon's announcement of Campbell's death, Max Baer, who waited nearby, broke down and sobbed inconsolably. 2 days after Frankie's death, his funeral was held. It was one of the largest and most elaborate funerals San Francisco had ever witnessed. Among the mourners, with the Campbell family's blessing, was Max Baer. Now, none of that was in the movie. Max helped support Frankie's widow and family for the rest of his life. It would have been nice if a single word of this was in the movie, or if people posting hateful questions about Max Baer had one iota of the truth. Max Baer was a good man. Okay, let's move to the next one on the list. Yeah, but none of that was in the movie Cinderella Man. Ron Howard. Yeah, he just made Max look terrible. But the next one is Jack Sharkey. Third of the 6 heavyweight champions in the first 7 years of the 1930s. Jack Sharkey. Here's Jack Sharkey. I swear that music comes up by itself. I turned it down. Yeah, them gloves or something ain't the Boxing Mania podcast. Okay, Jack Sharkey. We're gonna try to get them all in. I wanted to look at a couple of fights that Joe Louis had with these fighters too. So how good of a boxer was Jack Sharkey? Yeah, Max took care of Frankie Campbell's family the rest of his life until he passed away. Yes, he did. But it's crazy how none of that was in the movie, though. They made about it. Jeffro was pissed, too. Okay. Jack Sharkey. Jeffro. And Buddy Baer, Max had a brother that boxed too. Jeffro wasn't a boxer. But anyway, Jack Sharkey is a long forgotten figure by most boxing fans. But he has a place in two very special clubs. The first one is the International Boxing Hall of Fame. The second, Sharkey was one of the few undisputed heavyweight champions in the history of the sport modern sanctioning era. In the Hall of Fame and an undisputed heavyweight champion. Two very special clubs called the Boston Guard. Jack Sharkey is one of boxing's more interesting characters. Now, though Sharkey is best remembered for losing the title on a foul in his earlier fight with Jack Dempsey, he's the only fighter to face both Jack Dempsey and Joe Louis. Just like Floyd Patterson is the only fighter to face Rocky Marciano and Muhammad Ali, this man Jack Sharkey is the only fighter to ever face the great Jack Dempsey and the great Joe Louis. Only one. So who was Jack Sharkey? Who was Jack? The man who would become the fighter Jack Sharkey was born Joseph Paul Dukaskas. He was born in Lithuania, October 26, 1902. The dirt poor immigrant family moved to Boston when Sharkey was a small child, and he grew up hard. Sharkey later spoke of selling fish as a child. When I was a kid, I used to catch bass with my bare hand and sell them. Old timers still remember me walking down the street carrying eels on my back. In the U.S. Navy, that's where Sharkey first stepped into a boxing ring. And it was only because the midshipman told him to substitute in the next fight, or he wouldn't get shore leave, right? Either didn't have a fighter, an opponent for the next fight, so they told Jack Sharkey, you're a fighter, you're not going on shore leave. That was his first fight. Following a few dozen fights, Sharkey was the Atlantic Fleet champion. And so he eventually headed back to Boston for his first pro fight. Found out he had it as a boxer. Asked what got him into boxing, and then fighting as a pro, Sharkey said, shore leave, to get saloons and girls in the Navy. Yep, that's what got him. The man said, if you don't participate in the next fight, you're not getting shore leave. You're going to be on this ship while everybody else out there having a good time. Jack fought and ended up becoming the fleet champion. And that's when he decided his real name, his born name, Joseph Dukaskas, was not a name sounding like a fighter. So he shortened it to Jack Sharkey. And he took it from his two idols. First of all, heavyweight champion Tom Sharkey. And he took the first name of his other idol, heavyweight champion Jack Dempsey, Jack Sharkey. And he hoped this sounded Irish since he began his career in Boston. Jack Sharkey was the Buster Douglas of his time. Immense talent, little discipline. Immense talent, little discipline. Okay, Arnie says Jack Sharkey is one that I don't know much about. That'll change. Yeah, Buster Douglas of his time, Arnie. Immense talent, little discipline. Okay, didn't like training. Now, Sharkey was a fine example of a fighter who did not devote himself to his craft. He drank, he partied, and when he did not train, he felt it was not very good. When he took it seriously and trained, he was a genuine Hall of Fame level champion. And he did make it into the Hall of Fame, the International. And again, Jack Sharkey is the only fighter to face both Jack Dempsey and Joe Louis. And is remembered best for those two fights. And another one of his fight against Max Schmeling. Then the Jack Dempsey fight, Sharkey entered the rankings at number 7 in 1925. By 1926, he was ranked number 2 behind Gene Tunney. So Gene Tunney, after fighting Dempsey in 1927, decided the best strategy forward was insisting on a title eliminator before giving Dempsey a rematch. You know, let them beat each other up. So after he defeated Jack Tunney in the first fight, Tunney was not going to just give Dempsey a rematch. He announced Dempsey had to earn it by beating top contender Jack Sharkey. And Sharkey was willing to whip a faded Dempsey in order to get a shot at Tunney in the ring, saying, I want Tunney. He's the next man for me. But if I have to, I'm ready to battle Jack Dempsey. After lengthy negotiations with Tunney to secure an agreement to meet the winner, in negotiation between the camps of Dempsey and Sharkey to determine purses, a contract with all three were secured. On June 14, 1927, Dempsey's promoter, Tex Rickard, announced that Dempsey and Sharkey would fight, with the winner to meet Gene Tunney for the World Heavyweight Championship. At any date, time, and place Rickard would select. All that would be announced. Now, Dempsey got a purse of $252,000 in 1926, which today would be over $4 million, okay? And Sharkey got $206,000, which today would be like $3.5 million. So they got paid well for that title. This was just a title eliminated. On June 20, 1927, that was. On June 21st, 1927, Dempsey and Sharkey met in a title eliminator at Yankee Stadium in front of 82,000 people. 82,000. Now, most sports experts thought Dempsey was shot, having lost his speed in the 3 years he took off before he lost to Tunney, right? In a pre-fight poll of 25 sports writers, 16 picked Sharkey to win. 9 picked Dempsey. 9 picked Dempsey. Sharkey entered the ring as a 7-5 favorite. From the opening bell, it appeared the sports writers were correct, and Sharkey battered the former champion from pillar to post, all over the ring. The radio broadcaster Graham McNamee told radio listeners during the fight broadcast that Dempsey was groggy and appeared to be going after Sharkey. No, he was groggy and appeared to be getting ready to be stopped, right? After Sharkey battered Dempsey around the ring in the first round, the third round, and again in the sixth round, everybody just knew Dempsey had no chance after that. Sharkey won the second, fourth, and fifth rounds as well, but not as dominantly. But he won all of them. That's about all the first 6 rounds of the fight. BBO Sports TV in the building. What's up, BBO? Tonight at 8. Monday through Thursday at 8 p.m. You better catch him tonight because that's it. We'll be back on tomorrow. Yeah, listen to them chumps talking about ring walks and all that kind of nonsense. But we're going to have BVO Monday through Sunday soon. Hey, so yeah. But salute BVO. How you doing today? All right. But tonight at 8, BVO Sports TV on the Sports Talk Network. Fire show. Fire show. Okay. Yeah. So Sharkey was dominating Jack Dempsey, right? And everybody thought Dempsey was getting ready to be stopped. James Dawson of the New York Times, who was ringside, wrote during the fight that Sharkey had badly outboxed Dempsey, leaving the former champion to flounder around the ring, flat-footed, bewildered, and staggering like a blind man. Right? That's what this one sports writer said about Dempsey. Another one said, from the Chicago Tribune at ringside, said Dempsey was finished in the 4th round. And a pitiful sight, right? And Dempsey was bleeding badly. There was steady body punching in the 5th and 6th were having an effect on Sharkey. Still, Sharkey had the fight well in hand. And Dempsey admitted after the fight, I thought he was going to knock me out. But, in round 7, Dempsey turned it around by landing a series of vicious low punches. Low punches, right? Sharkey, facing pain, turned to the referee to protest and literally was protesting to the referee when Dempsey unloaded on him with a left hook to the chin while his hands were down, and he was literally speaking to the referee, but protect yourself at all times. I hit him with one of the last good punches of my life, said Dempsey. It was everything I could throw. His chin was sticking out there, unprotected. I couldn't miss. Wow. Dempsey hit the man low, and then the man turned to complain to the referee, and Dempsey caught him on the chin. So again, Sharkey turned to the referee, Jack O'Sullivan, and dropped his hands. He started to complain. He hit me low, and Sharkey never got to finish the sentence. Dempsey knocked him out. Dempsey won, but he blew Sharkey's lights out with one of the most egregious fouls in boxing history. Sharkey had dominated the entire fight up to the 7th round, but as Dempsey cheerfully said later, protect yourself at all times. First rule in boxing. He didn't, and he went to sleep. Legal? Yes, strictly speaking. Just as Floyd knocked out Victor Ortiz when he dropped his hands was legal. But it certainly was different from saying simply that Dempsey knocked Sharkey out. Yeah, that's how that fight ended. Protect yourself at all times. So that was one of Sharkey's most memorable fights. Remember I said the 2 most memorable fights was him and Joe Louis. He had a pretty good couple with Max Schmeling too, but mainly Sharkey and Joe Louis and Jack Dempsey. That was his most memorable one there. Jack Dempsey was getting the crap beat out of him, so he started to hit the man low, and the man turned to complain to the referee and dropped his hands. And what was he thinking? You're in there against Jack Dempsey, the Manasseh Mauler, man. You can't do that. Dempsey said he dropped his hands and his chin was wide open, sticking out. Okay, let's talk about James J. Braddok now. The Cinderella Man. This is the one where Ron Howard made the movie about and made a villain out of Max Baer, left all the good stuff Max Baer had did in his life. And to make James the Cinderella Man look good. And yeah, this is James J. Braddok now. Appreciate your BBL. 100%. Did I tell y'all BVO coming on the night at 8? Prize Fighter D. Free Marky Dan. Might have Crush the Legend up there. All of them on the same panel, man. That chat should have like 400 people in there listening, man. I'm serious. People be sleeping. So they're out there listening to nonsense like, oh, his gloves and his shorts matched up perfectly on the ring. Well, they were fabulous. That's what people want to listen to. I ain't gonna say no names, but I was in this podcast last night. It had like 400 people, man, and it was just ridiculous. I was like, what? I mean, this is what these people want to listen to? Well, let's talk about James J. Braddok, I think. What's going on here? We're trying to get in all 5 preceding champions that preceded Joe Louis. Because, you know, the first 6 years of the 1930s was 6 different champions. Large turnover, man. And then Joe Louis made number 6 in 1937, right? I don't know. Joe Louis made number 6 in 1937. Yeah. People were winning the title and losing it fast in that decade. I gotta reset this thing, man. That's gonna take 1 minute. Crazy. It is James J. Braddok right there, though. He was the one Joe Louis actually won the title from when he first got it. It was James J. Braddok, the Cinderella Man. Yeah. And then Joe Louis kept it until 1949. One of the 1937, kept it until 1949, 12 years. Now, he did take 4 years off in the 40s for the war. He did fight between 1942 and 1946. He was in the war. Not many people did. They did have fighting, but it wasn't, you know, a lot of the top level from all different countries fought the war for their country, you know. Not just the United States. Yeah. A lot of the top fighters in all different weight classes. They had to defeat Hitler and the Nazis. The world gonna be coming for our asses, and Donald Trump keep on hacking up. I'm gonna be a little ego immigrant somewhere. I'm getting out of here. Okay, let's get this going. I'm going down there with irony in Puerto Rico. Getting out of the United States, man. Okay, James J. Braddok, the Cinderella Man. Now, I got it. I had to restart it. I ain't even gonna tell y'all what I did to my laptop again. Before it messed around and knocked the liquid over in it. Just like I did the last one, man. Now I gotta buy another one. Ain't that crazy? I'll have to holler at some of my nephews, like BVO and Crush, and Arnie, somebody to get a fund going, get cash sports on a laptop. Okay, James J. Braddok, I got it. The Cinderella Man, yeah. Then we got one more will be Max Schmeling. That's the big one. That's the one that beat Joe Louis. And I wanted to talk about the 2 Schmeling fights. Schmeling knocked Joe Louis out in fight number 1, and Joe Louis knocked Schmeling out in fight number 2. But between those first 2 fights, there was some ducking going on. And guess who was doing the ducking? Joe Louis. Joe Louis ducked Max Schmeling for a while. Yes, he did. I'm going to tell you about it in a minute. Yep. Joe Louis claimed that he wanted his get back so bad against Max Schmeling, but he fought like 3 different fights when Max Schmeling was the #1 contender for the title. Fought like 3 different people before he fought Schmeling, trying to age Schmeling out. That happened. Yes, it did. Yeah, the Brown Bomber was doing some ducking. Okay, but let's talk about James J. Braddock, the Cinderella Man. Now, if you want your get back so bad, wouldn't that be your next fight? How are you gonna fight 3 other people first? So he didn't want his get back that bad. Tried to age the man out. Okay, let's see. Yeah, it is right there. Oh no. Okay, let's go to Max Schmeling. I can't get this James J. Braddock working correctly. Max Schmeling. And then we're going to talk about some Max Schmeling and Joe Louis fights. Okay, Max Schmeling is next. It's Joe Louis and Max Schmeling right there. Okay, here we go. A German-American Life. Max Schmeling as villain and hero. From today's vantage point, it is hard to understand the enormous international significance that was attached to a boxing match in 1938. As I said, 89 years ago. Something like that, 88. But anyway, it is hard to understand the enormous international significance that was attached to this fight. It's important to remember that at this point in history, the heavyweight the heavyweight championship was the top prize in all the sports at that time in 1938. The heavyweight champion of the world was considered the strongest man on the planet and the ultimate athlete in a time when boxing was the most popular spectator sport. There was great national pride taken in the man who held the title. For Maximilian Adolf Otto Siegfried Schmeling, holding the title was the loftiest goal imaginable, and one that constantly pulled him between the United States and Germany, embroiling him deeply in the politics of both nations. In one of his autobiographical works, he wrote, "My life is that of a German in the 20th century, or perhaps more precisely, it was a German-American life." He's 100% German, but he called it a German-American life. The 1930s was a difficult time in both America and Germany. As the two countries faced their individual economic problems, dramatic new governmental approaches were being adopted. The New Deal in the United States and National Socialism in Germany. Both Joe Louis and Max Schmeling came from impoverished backgrounds. The American was the seventh son in a family of Alabama sharecroppers. His family eventually moved to Detroit to work in the automobile plant, but lost their jobs during the economic collapse in the United States during the Great Depression. Schmeling was born in Germany, the son of a merchant navigator for the Hamburg American shipping line. He left home at the age of 16 and worked odd jobs. Spent some time with the circus and begged on the street. I remember the bitterest time, he later said. I was 18 years old and broke in the city of Moorhound. When I could afford to, I slept in the basement of a building for a nickel. A rope was stretched from one wall to the other, a few inches above the floor, and men laid on the floor using the rope for a pillow. Damn. Let me read that again. Slept in the basement of a building for a nickel, Max Schmeling. A rope was stretched from one wall to the other, a few inches above the floor, and men laid on the floor using the rope for a pillow. Schmeling was only 18 when he won the German light heavyweight title. By age 19, he was a European light heavyweight champion and the first German to hold that title. At age 22, he became the German heavyweight champion. He was 25 years old when he challenged the American Jack Sharkey for the World Heavyweight Championship. He moved from provincial poverty to international fame and wealth solely on the strength of his athletic dedication and abilities. Living the dream that brought so many of that era's young men from similar backgrounds into the boxing gyms of the world. During the era of the Weimar Republic, Schmeling was a sensation among the art crowd of Berlin's cabaret society, who thought he represented man's primitive fury in modern dress. Very strangely, in light of the later portrayal of the two boxers as polar opposites, Louis was, in his early days, portrayed by the American press in exactly the same terms. Schmeling's friends included the artist George Gross, the filmmaker Joseph von Sternberg, and the novelist Heinrich Mann. He was depicted in painting and sculpture as a symbol of the vital, new, and cosmopolitan German spirit that had sprung up during the Weimar years. In the early 1930s, the Nazis also took notice of Schmeling, not through any intrinsic love of sport, but for the same reasons that he was adopted by the artistic, for use as a charismatic symbol whom they could attach their own meaning. When questioned about the highly publicized photograph of his presence at dinner with the Hitlers, Schmeling answered, "It's normal for the head of state to have a reception for a successful athlete. I wonder though, if the press mentioned how many times I turned Hitler down. Did they ever mention that I'd had dinner with President Roosevelt? That he used to come to my training camp? That I used to correspond and trade stamps with Roosevelt and Jim Farley, his campaign manager? No. Hitler really embarrassed me and my wife." Some of this is clearly Schmeling rewriting his own life in retrospect, since the young and ambitious athlete was clearly flattered by the attention from the highest ranking government officials, especially after being snubbed by the former president, Paul von Hindenburg, who could not be bothered to meet with the boxer, even after he won the heavyweight title. Contrary to his later portrayal as standard bearer for Nazi Germany, Schmeling had, in fact, been a hit in America when he first arrived in 1928, and his first New York appearances brought wild ovations. He was greatly helped by his uncanny resemblance to Jack Dempsey, by that time a very popular ex-heavyweight champion, with whom he had fought an exhibition match in 1925. 6 American promoters had vied for the job of representing Schmeling, including Ned Fleischer, the founder and editor of Ring magazine, before Schmeling settled on Joe Jacobs, a flamboyant Jewish character better known as Yussel the Muscle. With his famously powerful right hand, Schmeling was considered a strong contender for the heavyweight title that had been recently vacated by Gene Tunney. The first of many reversals between hero and villain was brought about by the way in which Schmeling won the title in his 1930 fight with Jack Sharkey. In the 4th round of their fight, Schmeling was floored by Sharkey. As the German lay crumpled on the canvas, his manager started screaming at the referee and judges that Schmeling had been hit below the belt. After several minutes of debate, Schmeling was declared the winner on a foul and was carried out of the ring as a half-conscious heavyweight champion. Only man to ever win the heavyweight title on a foul to this day. He was ridiculed in America and lampooned in Germany as the low-blow champion. In the first of many politically charged cartoons of Schmeling that appeared in U.S. newspapers, the German boxer was portrayed sneaking out of America with a bag full of dollars and with the Statue of Liberty sticking her tongue out at him as his ship left for the fatherland. Schmeling regained the sympathy of the American people when he lost the title to Sharkey in the rematch. The split and disputed decision was widely considered a bogus manipulation that was engineered by New York officials to return the championship to the United States. Although Schmeling dominated the last 5 rounds, the referee, one of Sharkey's closest friends, named the American the winner on points. And how one of your best friends on referee your fight? When the verdict was announced, the furious Joe Jacobs, Schmeling's manager, yelled a line that instantly entered the American vernacular. We was robbed. He was joined in condemning the decision by New York Mayor Jimmy Walker and all the newspapers in America. The constant tide of popular opinion turned against the German in his very next fight, in which he knocked out former welterweight and middleweight champion, the toy bulldog, Mickey Walker. Despite the long history of champions moving up in weight to challenge bigger men, Schmeling was seen as a bully who picked on a smaller opponent. In June of 1933, the Nazi persecution of Jews was already being reported in American newspapers as Schmeling squared off against future champion Max Baer. Although not Jewish, Baer prominently wore the Star David on his trunks to win the support of the huge number of Jewish boxing fans. Cultural historian David McGarlick writes, Jews were all over boxing, not just as fighters and fans, but promoters, trainers, managers, referees, propagandists, equipment manufacturers, suppliers, chroniclers. This large and vocal segment of the American boxing world turned against Schmeling as reports of persecution began to emerge from Germany. As Baer knocked out Schmeling in the 10th round, singer Al Jolson was reportedly shouting from ringside, "Come on, Jew boy, kill that nut." However, that same month, Ring magazine editor Ned Fleischer attested to Schmeling's conflicts with the Nazi regime. In an article entitled Hitlerism Strikes Jewish Fighters and Managers, the Jewish American writer described the purging of Jews from the German boxing scene by the German Boxing Federation, which took titles away from German Jewish champions, banned them from boxing in the country, and issued an ultimatum that all German fighters must dump their Jewish managers. Fleischer pointed out that this last item was particularly directed at Schmeling and his heavyweight colleague, Walter Nussel, also managed by a Jew. The writer asked, what about Max Schmeling? Will he permit the Federation to dictate to him when he has not fought in Germany for almost 4 years? Will he throw aside the man who made him a world champion, Joe Jacobs, American Hebrew, to abide by the German verdict? Will he accede to that ruling when he has an opportunity to regain the world crown by continuing under the guidance of this American Jew? I venture to predict that he will tell the Federation officials to take a trip to Hague, where they belong. After a loss in Philadelphia and a draw in Barcelona, Spain, Schmeling returned to Germany to knock out the country's new top heavyweight, Walter Nussel, in front of a crowd of 102,000 spectators. Still the record attendance for a European boxing match. 2 more wins in Germany set him up for a 1936 fight with the man now considered the uncrowned champion of the heavyweight division, the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis. After the fight with the undefeated United States fighter was announced, Hitler and the Nazi higher-ups were annoyed that Schmeling had agreed to fight a black American, which they thought was beneath the dignity of an Aryan athlete. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels ordered German newspapers to bury the story. Entering the fight as a 10-1 underdog, Schmeling repeatedly drilled Louis with his powerful right hand by taking advantage of a technical flaw he had discovered by carefully studying film of Louis's fights. The American regularly held his left arm low after throwing a jab. Unable to adjust his technique as the fight progressed, the undefeated Louis was knocked out in the 12th round. Schmeling returned to Germany as a national hero. Despite their efforts to stop Schmeling from fighting a black American in the first place, the Nazi elite now hailed him for a decisive victory. Reversing their earlier ban on reporting the fight, the administration now ordered the release of the recorded fight as a feature film throughout the country. Its title was Schmeling's Victory, a German Victory. While the boxer rejected Hitler's personal urgings that he join the Nazi Party, he did make frequent appearances at the homes of both Hitler and Goebbels, the propaganda minister, and at Nazi events and rallies. He later tried to excuse his relationship with the party elite by saying, "I had turned down the Führer 4 times, and you don't turn him down 5 times. That did not make me a Nazi. I also had dinner with Roosevelt. That did not make me a Democrat." Although Schmeling had a signed contract to fight the new heavyweight champion, Jim Braddok, pressure from Jewish anti-Nazi groups in the United States scuttled the fight. Braddok agreed instead to fight Joe Louis, who handily won the title and immediately began calling for a rematch with the German boxer, who had handed him his long defeat in his career. The worldwide press quickly began to play the fight up as a battle between the representatives of democracy and fascism, with democracists acting as living embodiments of the two political systems. However, neither fighter comfortably fit the iconic roles they had been assigned to play, and neither fighter wanted those roles. Just like Joe Frazier didn't want his role against Ali in '71 as the war hero. Frazier just wanted to fight. But anyway, Lewis was a Black American catapulted into the role of democracy's warrior. 27 years before the Voting Rights Act of 1965 outlawed discriminatory voting practices. In an era when racial segregation permeated all aspects of American life. Throughout his career before the second Schmeling fight, he was caricatured by American newspapers in racist cartoons and write-ups as an ignorant Southern Negro who fought on animal instinct. Suddenly, he was transformed almost overnight into the shining beacon of American freedom and fair play. Underscoring the conflict and making a Black man the symbol of a united America, and in a parallel to Schmeling's refusal to join the Nazi Party, Joe Louis campaigned for 1940 Republican presidential candidate Wendell Winkle because he believed that Franklin D. Roosevelt had not supported the anti-lynching bill. Although Schmeling was held up by the Nazi administration before the fight as a proud example of Aryan manhood, he did not fit the Nordic profile. With his kinky dark hair and his thick black eyebrows, he was definitely not the blonde and blue-eyed hero of legend. His wife looked much more the Nordic type, but Amy Annie Andra was born Anna Sophie Andrakova, and a Czech origin marked her as a Slav, and therefore outside of the pure bloodline demanded by the Third Reich. Schmeling was pressured by the Nazis to leave Annie, but the Czech blood was obviously not enough to keep propaganda minister Goebbels from having designs on her affections. Schmeling was also repeatedly pressured by the administration to leave his Jewish American manager, Joe Jacobs, but he never backed down on his loyalty to Jacobs. Yeah, never got rid of Joe Jacobs. Sure didn't. As the rematch became couched in nationalist terms, American writers reversed themselves in the way they portrayed the fighters. Up to that point, Schmeling had been portrayed as an intelligent, calm, and thoughtful fighter, while Lewis was written about in racialist terms as being closer to the animal, to the primitive, and is fighting on instinct. Now, these same portrayals were given different connotations. Lewis was a simple American youth fighting for the American way, and Schmeling was the cold and calculating German from the Rhine. The same newspapers that had been unanimous in their support of Schmeling after his disputed loss to Sharkey were now unanimous in their condemnation of Schmeling as a Nazi tool. Schmeling admittedly could at times come across as a bit of a supremacist. Before the first fight, he remarked, Lewis not only has marked mechanical flaws, but he's not a very bright boy. That's what Schmeling said before the first fight. He also said of Lewis, I wouldn't have fought a colored man if I didn't think I could beat him. Although he did refuse to join the Nazi Party, Schmeling willingly helped the German propaganda machine by insisting to the American press that nothing was a myth back home in the fatherland. As friends from his Berlin days were persecuted by the Nazis for their Jewishness, homosexuality, or political views, Schmeling was being given tax breaks, publicity, and other favors by the Nazi regime. Although he was privately pressured, there was no public repercussion for Schmeling's loyalty to his Jewish manager and Czech wife. There was, however, a price to be paid. Summoned by Hitler in 1933, he was told, when you go to the United States, you're going to obviously be interviewed by people who are thinking very bad things are going on in Germany at this moment. And I hope you'll be able to tell them that the situation isn't as bleak as they think it is. Schmeling carried out his assignment, denying to American journalists that Jewish people were being persecuted in Germany. He said that he had never seen Germany so quiet, unified, or hopeful. He not only insisted that he had seen no harm caused to the Jewish population, but he said that any pain they might be undergoing was caused by their own promulgation of anti-Nazi tales in New York and other places outside Germany. Schmeling's Jewish American manager, speaking out against the boycott, the German boxing. Schmeling's Jewish American manager, speaking out against the boycott of the German boxing by Jewish activists in the United States, sought to shore up his fighter's business prospects by insisting that most of the troubles with the Jews over there is caused by the Jews in this country. Jacobs also famously got into hot water with American Jews when a photograph was circulated showing him giving a Nazi salute in the ring after one of Schmeling's victories in Germany. Wow, Jacobs. Okay. Getting late. Wow. We're not going to be able to finish this, but yeah, it went on to talk about the fight with Joe Louis and everything, and then it went on after the fight. After he lost to Joe Louis, Schmeling was like almost 40, and way past the age where you were eligible to go in the army, but the Nazis forced him into the army and sent him to the front lines. Because Schmeling was very popular in Germany, and they didn't want to outright, straight up kill him. So they forced him into the army and sent him to the front line, thinking that he would be killed there. But Schmeling made it back. And he was and the unit they put him in was protesting, and Schmeling was way too old to be in this unit, but the Nazis put him in there anyway because they thought they was going to kill him on the front lines, but he made it back. And then he became a big executive in Coca-Cola. And when he heard Joe Louis, his old opponent, was having financial problems in the United States, Schmeling came to the United States and helped Joe Louis out financially, paid for Joe Louis's funeral, was a pallbearer. And then when Joe Louis died, Schmeling supported Joe Louis's wife for the rest of her life. Okay? Yeah, Max Schmeling. He saved 2 Jewish teenagers. They had this thing going on in Germany where they were going from neighborhood to neighborhood, house to house, rounding up the Jews, either burning down Jewish businesses, killing them or putting them in concentration camps. And Schmeling had a friend that was Jewish, and he came to him with his 2 sons, 2 teenage sons, and told Schmeling to hide them in their house. So they were staying at a hotel, told Schmeling to hide them in their suite. And the Nazis came there, and Schmeling kept them hidden, right? And then he helped them get out of the country safely. And told them never to tell anybody. But one of the sons, when they grew up later, told the story. One of those teenagers became some big-time executive of a casino in Las Vegas. One of the Jewish teenagers that Schmeling saved, moved to the United States and became a big-time executive in Las Vegas at a casino. But yeah, these were the 5 champions that preceded Joe Louis today. Sharkey. No, in order. PRIMO Carnera, Max Baer, Sharkey, James J. Braddok, Max Schmeling. Actually beat Schmeling after he got the title. Schmeling beat him before he got the title. Tomorrow, profile, life and career of Layla Ali. Life and career of Layla Ali. 24-0, 21 knockouts, 87% knockout ratio. We're going to talk about Layla tomorrow. And being Muhammad Ali's daughter, she had all the pressure of the world on her shoulders to be good at boxing. And by the time her career ended, she was no longer just the daughter of Muhammad Ali. She was Layla Ali. She made her own name in the sport. 87% knockout ratio is unheard of in women's boxing to this day. It's got to be the record, the highest knockout ratio ever for a woman that I've heard of. 21 knockouts in 24 fights. And we're going to talk about her tomorrow, Layla Ali. Okay. Got more boxing talk coming up. We got Just Do Boxing coming up at 4. BBO Sports TV and the gang at 8. Arnie Boxing round 9. So a lot of good boxing shows coming up. Yeah, Arnie, I had ran out of time. I was trying to get them in. Yeah. We'll get some tomorrow though. By tomorrow, yeah. Yeah, I didn't know the Max Schmeling. I had looked at it earlier, but I didn't realize how long it was, Wow. But yeah, don't forget Layla Ali tomorrow and some great shows coming up in these YouTube streets the rest of the day. Fire shows. And I appreciate everybody that stopped by today. Hit the like, subscribe. BBO Sports TV, Irony Boxing, Crush the Legend, Technique, Mike Madzik, the Boxing Menu Podcast, Mike Grimm, and Miss Cass. Appreciate everybody 1,000,000 percentage points. What was Layla Ali's nickname? Anybody know? I can't get down too much. It with me for a second. Okay, we're back. Yeah, well, I'll know it by I know it, but I don't know it right now. But appreciate everybody. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Boxtorian bringing you all of that boxing history. Everybody have a great afternoon. Cass, what's the Boxtorian?